A three-person marriage, twin sisters, one husband, and the lie that unraveled it all. The sunset cast a bolt of burnt orange silk across the fishing village of Seabrook, dyeing the air with a heart-wrenching beauty. A briny wind howled in from the ocean, carrying the whispers of the old coastal pines, a mournful dirge for the dying day. In the midst of this lonely, poetic scene, the strangest of weddings was unfolding, becoming the focus of every hushed rumor among the fishermen who knew nothing but the waves and their daily catch. On an altar built hastily from bamboo and strung with clusters of wild seaside flowers, two young women in pure, ivory-white wedding dresses stood side by side. They were identical in every feature, from their high, elegant noses and full red lips to the profound depth in their eyes, so much so that it felt like looking at a flawless reflection in a mirror. They were Clara and Stella, the village's famous twin sisters, two individuals who shared one body, one soul. Yet, a closer look revealed a subtle difference flickering in their eyes. Clara, the elder, possessed a deep, somber melancholy, like the calm sea before a storm. Stella, the younger, radiated a bright, fierce determination, like the morning sun. Clasping both their hands was Ethan, a successful developer from the glittering city who had come to this remote coastline to build a massive eco-resort. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, his chiseled, masculine face and confident air had made both of the sisters' innocent hearts flutter at the very same time. And then, the unimaginable happened. They had fallen in love together, confessed their feelings together, and now stood together as the wives of one man. The villagers held their breath, unable to understand if this was true love or some cruel joke played by fate. The officiant's voice shattered the thick silence. "Do you agree to love, cherish, and walk with these two women for the rest of your life, through all circumstances?" Creeders mattered. Without a hint of hesitation, Ethan's voice rang out, low and firm. "I do. But on one condition." General same.aged. Everyone froze. Ethan's gaze swept over his two new brides as he spoke slowly. "There will be absolutely no jealousy or comparison. If either of you breaks this rule, the marriage is terminated immediately, and I will walk away and never return." To agents as not lace, and then tased to as not lace. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of distant waves. Clara squeezed her sister's hand gently, while Stella gave a firm, determined nod. Together, they answered, "We agree." Canceston raisined. The strangest vow Seabrook had ever witnessed was sealed in the fading light of dusk. In their innocence, they believed that love was big enough to be shared, strong enough to conquer any prejudice. But they failed to see the cold glint that flashed for just a moment in Ethan's deep-set eyes, signaling that the tragic play had only just begun. In the first days after the wedding, their life together unfolded with a strange, forced sweetness. Clara and Stella had created a detailed schedule, divvying everything up with minute-by-minute fairness. They took turns being by Ethan's side. If one cooked breakfast, the other prepared his lotus tea. If one was talking with him, the other was cleaning the house. It was a meticulous arrangement, as clinical as a business contract rather than the foundation of a home. But human emotion is not something that can be weighed or measured by rigid rules. Gradually, Clara, with her sensitive and introspective nature, began to notice things. She saw that Ethan's gaze always held a special warmth for Stella, a certain indulgence. One afternoon, as Clara carried a basket of fresh seafood in from the back patio, she saw Stella bursting into laughter at something witty Ethan had said. He leaned in, whispering something in the younger sister's ear that made her cheeks flush. The moment, though lasting only a few seconds, was like an invisible needle pricking Clara's heart. She quickly turned away, trying to swallow the discomfort rising in her chest. But she knew that a crack, however small, had just appeared in her absolute trust. From that moment on, Clara could no longer be carefree. She started paying closer attention to the seemingly accidental gestures between Ethan and Stella. In the evenings, when the three of them sat on the porch to catch the breeze, Stella would still casually lean her head on Ethan's shoulder, laughing as she told some rambling story. Ethan never pushed her away. He would just smile, his hand sometimes coming to rest lightly on Stella's as a natural, practiced reflex. Clara sat quietly beside them, her heart tightening with each occurrence. She had never dared to do such a thing. Even as his wife, she always kept a certain distance, constantly reminding herself not to do anything that might make Stella feel uncomfortable. But now, the one who tried so hard to follow the rules was the one who was beginning to feel like an outsider. Their meals were no longer as joyful. The sounds of laughter now belonged only to Ethan and Stella, while Clara sat in silence, picking at her food without tasting a thing. One afternoon, returning from the market, she saw Ethan and Stella rearranging the living room furniture together. They were laughing, and Ethan leaned down and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from Stella's cheek. That intimate, tender gesture was like a sharp knife, slicing deep into Clara's already fragile soul. She quietly set her basket on the steps, unable to enter the house. She just stood watching from afar, a feeling of utter loneliness washing over her. That night, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Was she jealous? She asked herself. Was she about to become the first one to break the rule they had all set? Unable to bear the suffocating feeling, Clara slipped out of bed and went to the back patio, where the sea wind stung her face. She wanted to cry, but the tears were caught in her throat. Just then, Ethan stepped out, his voice soft in the darkness. "What's wrong?" The clattering stayed on the rations. Clara flinched, quickly wiping away the tear that threatened to fall. She forced a smile. "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired. It is never reading from aging." He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've been too quiet lately. If something's wrong, you can tell me. It's not latest. It's not. Clara remained silent. She wanted to tell him that she was terrified of losing him, of losing Stella, and of losing herself in this bizarre marriage. But she couldn't speak the words, because the fear itself felt too vague, too fragile. Instead, she just nodded slightly, her voice strained. "I'll try not to make things difficult for you." Greed, any disdains. Ethan looked at her for a moment longer before turning away in silence. That night, she had a strange dream. She was alone in the vast house, wandering through empty, cold rooms. The dream was a terrible omen, a premonition that haunted her. After that night, Clara began to change. She no longer tried to wedge her way into conversations between Ethan and Stella. She retreated, becoming a silent observer, a forgotten witness in her own marriage. One weekend evening, a fierce wind began to blow, and the small wooden house braced itself against the cold gusts whipping in from the sea. Stella, feeling tired, had gone to bed early. Clara lay on the bed, her back to Ethan, trying to force herself to sleep, but her eyes wouldn't close. Near midnight, Ethan's phone, resting on the nightstand, buzzed to life. The faint glow from the screen illuminated his sleeping face, making Clara squint. She had no intention of being nosy, but an invisible force compelled her. A text from an unsaved number, with only a few short words. "Is everything okay? Don't forget our original goal." Clara's entire body went rigid. She glanced at Ethan. His breathing was steady, showing no signs of waking. With a trembling hand, she slowly reached for the phone and opened the message thread. A long history of conversations appeared. The further she read, the colder her blood ran. A message sent from Ethan's number read, "These two are perfect. Willing to do anything for me. I'll just play the loving husband for a while. Once the resort project is complete, we pull all the capital and disappear. They're so naive they actually believe I married them both because I couldn't choose." Clara's heart stopped. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob that threatened to erupt. Her breathing grew heavy, her chest aching as if crushed by an invisible vice. Her entire world collapsed. In this play, it wasn't just her, it was Stella, the sister she loved more than anything, who was also just prey in Ethan's cruel, calculated plan. Clara scrambled out of bed, her bare feet stumbling onto the porch like a sleepwalker. She still clutched Ethan's phone, the cold proof of a truth too brutal to bear. The night wind lashed at her, but it was nothing compared to the ice seeping into every cell of her body. Betrayal. Ethan, the man both sisters had trusted completely, the man for whom they had defied all prejudice to make a lifelong vow, was nothing but a cold-blooded con artist. He had orchestrated this entire charade perfectly. And they, Clara and Stella, were merely pathetic puppets in his dirty game. Clara stood frozen in the thick darkness, her eyes fixed on the empty space before her. She didn't cry or scream. A single, haunting question echoed in her mind. Should I tell Stella? Or should I stay silent to keep from destroying everything? Her heart felt like it was being torn in two. On one side was the raw, painful truth. On the other, the only sister she had sworn to protect with her life. But no matter which path she chose, Clara knew that from this moment on, none of them could ever go back. Just before dawn, Clara returned to the room. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but shining with a strange resolve. She gently placed the phone back on the nightstand, then sank onto the edge of the bed, her gaze empty. Outside, the wind chimes tinkled, their clear, bright sounds like a sinister whisper. Tell her. Tell her. Suddenly, Stella stirred, rubbing her eyes as she looked over. Seeing her sister awake, she asked sleepily, "You're still up?" Clara turned, forcing a twisted smile. "Yeah, I just couldn't sleep." Stella sat up, pulling a thin shawl around her shoulders before moving closer to her sister. She placed a warm hand on Clara's shoulder, her eyes full of concern. "You're hiding something from me, aren't you? You've been acting so strange lately." Clara froze. For a fleeting second, she wanted to scream it all, to show her sister the proof of his disgusting deceit. But she hesitated. Could Stella, with her pure soul and innocent love, survive such a devastating blow? Taking a deep breath, Clara turned away, her voice strained. "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired." Stella sat beside her, resting her head on Clara's shoulder as she had since they were children. "Don't hide things from me. Whatever it is, I want to share it with you. You're all I have." "Clara." The words cut into Clara like a knife, making her chest tighten. She knew that telling the truth could save them both from this trap, but it could also mean losing each other forever. The next morning, the house was filled with a deceptive normality. Ethan casually brewed tea, Stella cheerfully cleaned, and Clara watched it all in silence. But now, when she looked at Ethan, her eyes held no love, only the wariness of a wounded animal forced to live with its predator. She noticed his every gesture, every glance, every time he snuck a text message, and it all confirmed her fears. That evening, Ethan told the sisters he had an urgent meeting with an important partner and might be back very late. Stella nodded naively. "Remember to wear a jacket. The sea wind gets cold at night." Ethan smiled. But to Clara, it was a sickeningly fake smile. She watched his back disappear down the small lane, a fire of determination igniting within her. She couldn't wait another second. She turned to Stella, her hand tightening around the phone hidden in her pocket. "Stella, there's something you need to know. And after you hear it, I'm not sure anything will ever be the same." Stella frowned, looking bewildered. "What are you talking about? What's so serious?" Clara looked directly into her sister's eyes, her own gaze trembling but fierce. "It's about Ethan. About the man we foolishly believed we could both love for the rest of our lives." A deadly silence fell over the room. Outside, the wind began to howl, as if signaling that a storm was about to break. Stella sat stunned, her eyes filled with disbelief. "What are you saying about Ethan?" Clara didn't answer. She simply pulled out the phone, unlocked it, and found the message she had read over and over again until she knew it by heart. The screen lit up, the treacherous words clear as day. "Just a few more weeks and we can get rid of these two girls. They both trust me completely. This Seabrook gold mine will be all yours soon." Stella took the phone with a trembling hand, her eyes glued to the screen, her lips moving without a sound. She stumbled back a step, her voice a hoarse whisper. This is Ethan's phone." Clara nodded, her own voice thick with emotion. "I saw him last night. He wasn't at any meeting. He was with a chic woman with styled, curly hair. They were laughing together. Read it. Stella. Don't believe me. Believe what you see with your own eyes." Still in shock, Stella scrolled through the messages, then stopped abruptly, gasping at a reply from Ethan that shattered her completely. They look strangely alike. And they're both equally foolish. Ah. A broken, painful sob escaped Stella's lips. She covered her mouth as if ashamed of the sound of her own grief. Clara stood there, saying nothing more, simply wrapping her arms around her sister's trembling shoulders. I understand now, Stella said through her tears. So we were nothing. Just a move in his game. Clara held her sister tighter. I wish I was wrong. She choked out. I wish this was all a misunderstanding. But it's not. Stella. He never loved either one of us. Stella was quiet for a long time. Then, suddenly, she lifted her head. Tears still streamed down her cheeks. But her eyes now glimmered with the fire of rage and indignation. We have to confront him. We have to make him pay for what he's done. We can't let him just walk away from this. Clara was stunned. She never expected her sister to react with such speed and strength. Are you sure? Stella nodded firmly. If we stay silent, hell, just go on and deceive other people. But if we speak up, at least we'll have our truth. And our dignity. The two sisters looked at each other. And in that moment, it felt as if they truly understood one another for the first time. Nothing more needed to be said. This fight had officially begun. And this time, it wasn't for blind love. It was for justice. That night, Clara and Stella sat together in the bedroom. A place that was once a warm sanctuary but now felt tainted by bitterness and doubt. Outside, the waves crashed endlessly. But within them, a violent storm was raging. Stella clutched a pillow, her eyes red and swollen. Clara, she whispered. If all of this was just an act, why does it hurt so much? There are tenity. She don't know little day. Clara gently stroked her sister's tangled hair, her own voice hoarse. Because we weren't acting. Stella. We loved him with our whole hearts. It's Taka's and Minden. A long silence stretched between them. The only sound the ticking of the clock. As if counting down to an explosion. Suddenly, Stella sat up straight. Her voice harder than ever before. We can't let him continue living peacefully in Seabrook. Do you know how many people trusted him? How many families sold the land their ancestors left them for his phantom project? What do you think would happen if everyone knew the real Ethan? It is not was the secudations with Muzzet. Clara hesitated. She had always been the gentler one, preferring to endure things quietly. But this had crossed a final line. You want to expose the truth. Redowns. Immortalen out of clowns too. It's not what I want. It's what we have to do, Stella said firmly. If we don't, he'll just use his flowery words to deceive more people. Just like he deceived us. Has no way. Informant follow. There isn't this problem. Clara's expression hardened with resolve. She knew her sister was right. Early the next morning, they left the house in silence. They walked every path in the village, knocking on every door, speaking to every fisherman and shopkeeper, anyone who had ever known and trusted Ethan. They told their entire tragic story, presenting the irrefutable evidence. The deceitful text messages, the photos, and the cold, hard recording of Ethan's confession from the night before. The villagers' initial reaction was shock, which quickly curdled into pure fury. My God! That man tricked both of you. A fishmonger cried out. He promised my son a manager position at that resort. Re-Mariki, another man chimed in. He said he would build a free school for the village children. Was it all a lie? Since created, 88 insings of screens outain. Every word was a spark, igniting the long-simmering outrage of the entire fishing village. That afternoon, Elder Miller, the most respected man in Seabrook, called an emergency town meeting. For the first time in years, the village square was packed, surrounded by hundreds of eyes. Ethan stood with his usual calm expression, but he could feel that the stares today were heavier, sharper, simultaneously judging, condemning, and convicting him. Elder Miller's voice was low and hard. We've heard everything. Do you have anything to say for yourself? En Vili came to bland. Ethan smirked, a look of pure contempt on his face. And you believe the words of two girls whose advances I rejected. Their history alone is enough to discredit them. I don't need to explain a thing. Why enter aiding my? Clara squeezed Stella's hand, her gaze unwavering. She spoke just one sentence. her voice calm. But it silenced the entire square. Then, I invite everyone to listen to the recording of his confession from last night. Say find him self-taking. The Dister Intons crested very lows. As she finished speaking, she played the recording she had prepared. Ethan's voice filled the suffocatingly tense air clear, cold, and damning. The crowd erupted. Ethan's calm demeanor shattered like a mask ripped from his face. People shouted, cursed, and threw stones and clumps of dirt at him. The fire of anger had been lit. And this time, it burned, not for love, but for justice. Terrified, Ethan scrambled away through the jeering crowd that poured from every alleyway. The image of the dapper, successful developer was gone. In his place was a pathetic fugitive, his hair a mess, his clothes disheveled. On the other side of the square, Clara and Stella stood silently, watching the traitor's figure disappear. Will he come back? Stella asked, biting her lip. Clara shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the end of the road. No. A man like that, once he's lost his power and his mask of decency, has no reason to stay. This is ready wise and when the level. But the villagers' anger was not appeased. They marched to the house Ethan had rented near the beach, broke down the gate, and ransacked the inside. Project documents, planning sketches, and massive invoices paid for by the villagers' trusted contributions were all exposed. Where is our money? He's robbed us blind. A middle-aged man, who had hoped the project would give his son a brighter future, cried in despair. That night, it seemed the entire village did not sleep. News of Ethan's true nature spread so fast that within hours, his name became a mark of shame whispered from house to house. Inside the small home that Clara and Stella had once called their sanctuary, the silence was terrifying. Stella sat alone before a mirror, holding a photo of the three of them on their wedding day. 3 faces, 3 smiles, 1 lie, 1 tragedy. Do you think I was wrong to have loved him so much? The spearing, and their enberfation resental rider to Galdis. In the bride and resental rider Proundus was not of the same self minions for musing. Clara came up behind her, placing a hand gently on her sister's shoulder. There's no shame in loving, Stella. The only mistake was trusting someone unworthy. Scintly asked of videos. Stella burst into tears. For the first time since her wedding day, she allowed herself to truly break. She cried not because of the betrayal, but because she had been foolish enough to believe she and her sister could share a love. Now she knew. Sharing like that only existed in fairy tales. Reality was blood, tears, and wounds that would never fully heal. I want to leave this place. Clara. It is a nevermunsen consness. Clara was silent. Outside the window, the moon was a dim haze, but the uncertainty in their hearts was darker than the night sky. The next morning, the sea was not its usual calm blue. Waves crashed violently against the shore, as if bidding farewell, or perhaps warning those who were leaving. In the small house, Clara quietly folded clothes into 2 worn-out suitcases. Every item she packed felt like folding away a painful memory. Stella sat on the corner of the bed, clutching the small journal she had once used to record her sweet memories with Ethan. Are you sure? Clara asked softly. Stella nodded, her voice hoarse. Staying here will only make me feel more pathetic. Why day? They had lost everything. Seabrook was still peaceful. But as the 2 sisters pulled their suitcases to the edge of the village, the eyes that followed them were no longer curious or mocking, but held a cold silence, more chilling than the sea wind. They reached the bus stop. The old, green bus was already waiting. There were no goodbyes, no one waving farewell. Yet Clara felt lighter than she had in a long time. She turned back one last time to look at the dirt road leading to the village, where they had once played in the sand as carefree children, held hands running in the rain, and thought they would never leave. Stella didn't look back. She only whispered, "Goodbye, Seabrook." In the Cree's disdain to beginning, the bus rumbled to life, kicking up dust that blurred the view through the window. For the first time in months, Clara fell asleep without dreaming of Ethan's eyes. Over 8 hours later, the city emerged before them. A cacophony of horns, thick smog, and jostling crowds. It was another world entirely. They rented a tiny room in a hidden alley. The walls were peeling and the ceiling was water-stained. But they both felt a strange sense of peace. That first night in the city, they sat on the floor and shared a packet of instant ramen. Clara sorted through job applications, while Stella wrote the first entry in a new journal. "Do you think everything will be okay?" Stella asked. Clara looked up and smiled. "I don't know. But at least we're not living a lie anymore." The stabbed of Laj perdistive braying. Early the next morning, while the city was still waking, the sisters were startled awake by the blare of car horns. Life was rushing on, waiting for no one. Stella woke with faint puffiness still around her eyes. But a smile of relief touched her lips. Clara quietly prepared their first breakfast in this new place. 2 plain bread rolls and a cheap carton of soy milk. But amid the old, damp walls, the smell of bread made the room feel strangely warm. After eating, they headed out. In their hands were a few shoddily photocopied resumes. The words hastily written, some smudged with ink. No work experience. No notable degrees beyond a high school diploma. But in their eyes was something many others lacked, an unbreakable faith in each other. They walked for the entire morning, dragging their feet from one coffee shop to the next, from convenience stores to street-side car washes. The response was always the same, a cold shake of the head, a refusal that became painfully familiar. "We have enough staff. In reason to the structured my pound. You need experience. We don't have time to train you from scratch." 7. Capting a very D's. It's tough without a reference. In their manterly life in the luntive reason any Westins, in the governed tensei. Clara slowed her pace, her voice raspy from the harsh sun and exhaust fumes. "I thought it would be a little easier than this. It's now thinkin' ratado." Stella laughed. A sound that was half sarcastic, half self-reassuring. If it were easy, they wouldn't call it starting over. To reserventations of servants outin, she was not might of dejection. In the afternoon, their legs aching, they stopped in front of a small cafe with a peaceful name, Serenity. The wooden sign was old, but the space inside was bright and clean. The owner, a woman in her 30s with short hair and sharp but friendly eyes, was busy wiping down the counter. Stella stepped inside timidly. "Excuse me, are you hiring?" Kay round her brow. The woman looked up, her gaze traveling over the 2 sisters, finally resting on their worn-out shoes and their tired but determined faces. "I am. But the work is hard and the pay is low. 6 in the morning to 9 at night. With a 2-hour break. Can you handle it?" Heaven adamant. "It is not lying." And this taken down of the sow from the stance. Before Stella could reply, Clara nodded eagerly. "Yes. We can do it. We just need a chance. It's no generating to our past an rating." The woman squinted at them for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. 1-week trial. If you can do the work, you're hired. If not, don't complain." "How has Helen heard from the rest of Nimmerys to Infinsum?" They bowed their heads in thanks, their eyes shining with a joy they hadn't felt in a very long time. That evening, sitting on the cool tile floor of their room, they ate takeout boxes of cheap rice. Every grain seemed to taste of new beginnings, of hope. Their first day at Serenity Cafe began with the rich aroma of roasting coffee beans. Clara and Stella, dressed in simple uniforms of moss green aprons and white shirts, looked on with a mix of anxiety and excitement. Teresa, the owner, wasn't a woman of many words. She gave instructions quickly and directly. Clara was in charge of washing dishes and cleaning, while Stella waited tables and took orders. They barely had time to feel awkward before the morning rush began. The first time Stella held a tray, her hand trembled slightly, the black coffee sloshing in the cup, testing her confidence. But every time she felt she was about to drop something, she would see Clara's encouraging gaze from behind the counter, a silent anchor that helped steady her. Clara wasn't having a much easier time. The industrial dishwasher was loud, splashing water everywhere, and her hands were quickly covered in soap. But despite the exhaustion, she carefully wiped every single glass until it sparkled. With every stain that washed away, it felt like a piece of an old, painful memory was being cleansed, restoring a clarity that had been lost. In the middle of the day, Teresa unexpectedly called Clara over and handed her a hot cappuccino. "Make one." she said. I want to see what you can do. See is a gending. Clara froze. She had never stood behind a professional coffee bar or had any formal training. But she took a deep breath, nodded, and got to work. Her hands were clumsy with the tools. And some coffee grounds spilled. Teresa's sharp eyes followed her every move. As the machine hissed to life, Clara's heart beat faster. She carefully poured the frothed milk into the cup and placed it on the counter. Teresa picked it up, took a small sip, and was silent for a long moment. It's not perfect, she said finally. But you have potential. Starting tomorrow, I'll teach you. Lokes maters of the Felbies. Clara couldn't hide her radiant smile. It was the first real validation she had received after everything that had happened. When they returned to their room that night, both sisters were exhausted. But before sleeping, Stella pulled out her small notebook and sketched a rough design for a coffee shop with a wooden door and a vibrant bougainvillea vine arching over the entrance. The shop's sign read, "The Twin Sisters." Clara saw the drawing, smiled softly, and pulled a thin blanket over her sleeping sister. They didn't know what the future held, but at least now, they had a dream to hold on to together. Clara and Stella's life in the city gradually found its rhythm. The Serenity Cafe, though small, was always cozy, and more importantly, Teresa was like a big sister, always quietly watching over and supporting the two young women. But the past never truly stays buried. One day, as Stella was cleaning the tables on the patio, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Seabrook is empty without you. I know I was wrong. I miss you." Stella's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to see a name to know who it was from. Biting her lip, she quickly turned off the screen and shoved the phone in her pocket, as if hiding it would lock away the painful memories. But the more you try to forget a memory, the more vividly it returns. That evening, Stella sat alone on the balcony, her eyes tracing the few stars visible in the city sky. Clara came out and sat down beside her. After a long moment, Stella finally spoke. "Clara, if Ethan found us here one day, what would you do?" "My house of Lily said. Channel is benistered. And they did mat of 9. Clara didn't answer right away. She looked up at the moon peeking out from behind the clouds, then said softly, "I wouldn't run. And I wouldn't hate him anymore. But I would never let him get the chance to hurt you again. I'm not a client with his wanting and dasins of rated drong them." Clara's words were like a balm, temporarily easing the anxiety in Stella's heart. But the thing she feared most eventually came to pass. The next day, a male customer walked into the cafe. He was tall, with perfectly styled hair, dressed in an expensive designer suit. Clara, standing behind the counter, froze. Stella, who had just stepped out from the kitchen, stopped dead in her tracks the moment she saw him. The man smiled, slowly removing a pair of black sunglasses to reveal the familiar face that had once shattered Stella's heart. It was Ethan Croft. He casually sat down at a corner table and ordered an Americano. "And if it's okay, I'd like to speak with you both for a moment." Ending this was of the Marit. No one answered. Clara turned away, continuing her work as if she hadn't heard a thing. Stella stood frozen for a few seconds, then walked over and slammed a glass of water on his table, her voice ice cold. "We have nothing to say to your kind of people. Please leave." "Including the self-tans, including the smans." Ethan looked up, his eyes pleading. "I know I don't deserve it. But I didn't come here to apologize. I just want to say one thing. I was wrong. In this now. It's not weighted with help of." Clara left the counter and came to stand beside Stella. She said nothing, only looking directly into Ethan's eyes. But her gaze no longer held love or resentment. It held only finality. "You weren't wrong," she said. "We were just foolish. And that's not Brees." With that, the two sisters turned and walked away, leaving Ethan sitting alone, stunned. In the cafe, the sound of the coffee grinder started up again, drowning out the echoes of the past. Customers continued their lively conversations. But for Clara and Stella, that was the moment they knew the past could no longer hold them captive. The door of the Serenity Cafe closed behind Ethan. The air inside seemed to grow heavy, as if the ghost of the past still lingered in the corners. Teresa didn't ask any questions. only continued to quietly wipe down the bar. But her eyes held a deep sympathy for the two sisters. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, placing a gentle hand on Stella's shoulder. Stella pursed her lips and nodded. But her hands were clenched together, her heart still pounding. Ethan's face, his familiar voice. It all swirled in her mind like shards of glass that had never been swept away. "I'm not scared of him anymore," Stella said softly. "But I hate that I still tremble in front of someone who hurt me so deeply." Clara sat down next to her, her gaze distant. "He doesn't have that power anymore. We survived the biggest storm. Nothing can make us fall now." But that very evening, something unexpected happened. A text from Teresa. "Girls, the cafe will be closed tomorrow. Someone just called to report a surprise inspection for our business license and food safety. Something feels off. You two be careful." Clara frowned. Stella froze. A sense of foreboding washed over them. Could it be Ethan? Early the next morning, as the sisters were cleaning the cafe, a man in a white shirt with a stern expression walked in and flashed an inspector's badge. "I'm from the city's health department. This is a scheduled inspection." Stella tensed up. Clara calmly stepped forward. "Shouldn't we have received prior notice?" The man glanced at her and gave a faint, cold smile. "Not this time. We are acting on direct orders from above." The inspection lasted nearly an hour. They scrutinized every corner of the kitchen, measured the refrigerator's temperature, and even checked the trash bins. Finally, the man placed a violation report on the table, noting a few trivial infractions but ordering the cafe to suspend operations for 3 days to fix them. Teresa took the paper without a word, but her eyes darkened. When the man left, Stella whispered, "It was him. It was definitely him." They needed no proof. They knew exactly whose hand was pulling the strings. He hadn't let them go. But this time, Clara's eyes no longer held weakness, but a fiercely burning will. "If he wants a war," she said, "then we can no longer retreat." That night, the small apartment was no longer filled with quiet resignation. A plan began to take shape. They remembered something Teresa had once told them, years ago. The land where Ethan was building his resort had belonged to her grandmother, but after a shady lawsuit, she lost everything, and the lawyer representing the buyer was none other than Ethan Croft. The next morning, they went to see Teresa and told her everything. The worldly woman sat in silence. She wasn't surprised, only offering a sad smile. "I once believed he would be the one to bring change to our hometown. Who knew he was a wolf in sheep's clothing?" Teresa sighed and pulled out a yellowed file. "This is a copy of the lawsuit from back then. I kept it because I always felt something was never right." Clara flipped through the pages. There was Ethan's signature and a coerced transfer document signed just after Theresa's grandmother had been hospitalized from a nervous breakdown. Stella's eyes narrowed. "If we bring this to light, it's not just revenge for us. It's a warning for everyone." "But are you ready to face the storm again?" Teresa asked. "Worried. The press, public opinion, even the people who once believed in you turning their backs." Clara smiled faintly. "We've already lost everything once, Teresa. We have nothing left to fear." That same afternoon, they met with an independent journalist named Mark, who had written numerous investigative pieces on land fraud. The meeting took place in a quiet cafe. After hearing their story, Mark looked them straight in the eye. "Your story will create a massive wave. But we need more witnesses. Was anyone else cheated by Ethan Croft? Like Theresa's grandmother?" Stella paused, then said quietly but firmly, "Yes. My sister and I, we were his wives. We trusted him, and he trampled us into the ground." Mark was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. Let's expose this man for who he really is." 3 days later, an article was published. The headline exploding like a bombshell. "Developer Ethan Croft, building paradise on the tears and blood of the poor." At the same time, a secretly recorded video of Ethan calling the Serenity Cafe a slum and saying he needed to clean up the trash before his resort was finished went viral. Overnight, the article was shared thousands of times. Former partners and others who had been conned by Ethan began leaving comments. A wave of outrage spread across social media. Back in Seabrook, the gossip started again. But this time, It wasn't aimed at Clara and Stella. That bastard, Ethan. His true colors are finally showing. And I can't believe those two sisters were the first to bravely stand up. That afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed nonstop. It was a text from an unknown number. Play with fire and you'll get burned. Know what's good for you and stop before it's too late. Clara stared at the words, her hand tightening into a fist. At the same moment, Ethan sat in his luxurious city office, his face like ice. He slammed his phone on the desk and snarled at his assistant. Those bitches think they can touch me. If they want to play, well, play for keeps. That night, when Clara and Stella returned to their apartment, they found the lock broken. Inside, their belongings were tossed everywhere. The wardrobe overturned. Papers torn to shreds. The room looked as if a hurricane had swept through, a threat delivered without a single word. Stella stood frozen, her eyes red with fury. Clara quickly grabbed her shoulder. Stay calm. This is what he wants. He wants us to lose control, to give up out of fear. But instead of fear, that very night, the sisters posted a clip of the break-in online. With the caption, "When the truth is silenced, violence speaks. But we will not back down." The post went viral. The next morning, Mark contacted Clara, his voice grave. "You two have opened a door no one else dared to. But now we need hard evidence. Not just clips or articles, but documents. Living witnesses. Real blood. I have a source. A former employee of Ethan's who is willing to talk if his safety is guaranteed." "Who is he?" Clara asked urgently. "They call him Mr. Davis. He was a logistics assistant on the project. After a dispute with Ethan, he was fired and basically disappeared. Has now in a fishing shack 2 villages over. I've arranged a meeting. But for safety, only one of you should go." Clara looked at Stella, then said without a shred of hesitation, "I'll go." That afternoon, Clara put on a thin raincoat and followed a slick dirt path through the coastal pines. The rain was light, but the sea wind howled through the leaves. Finally, she stood before a small, run-down shack with a tin roof. A man in his 50s, with a scraggly beard and wary eyes, opened the door. "You're from the Journalist, Mark?" Clara nodded. Mr. Davis was silent for a moment before pulling her inside. On a rickety wooden table sat a black USB drive. "This has audio recordings and security footage from the resort. One of them shows Ethan forcing people to sign over their land." Clara took the USB, feeling its weight in her palm. She knew what she was holding wasn't just evidence, but a weapon. And the real war had only just begun. Clara returned to the apartment as dusk settled. Stella was huddled in the small, dark room, her eyes wet with worry. The moment she saw her sister's silhouette, she rushed forward and hugged her tightly, breathing a sigh of relief. "Where have you been? I was worried sick. This is nating the present. This is nating the friends in the Staines town there." Clara gently patted her sister's back. "I have something. And it's going to change everything." She pulled the USB drive from her pocket and placed it on the table. Both sisters stared at the tiny object, as if it held a dark secret just waiting to be exposed. With a trembling hand, Stella plugged the USB into their laptop. Their hearts pounded in their chests. Clara took a deep breath and clicked play on the first audio file. Ethan's voice filled the room, chillingly clear and cold. "I don't care if their families agree or not. Force the price down to the absolute minimum. If they won't sell, send some guys to pressure them. But make sure it doesn't get out. Once this project is done, I'll have enough capital to expand my resort chain across the country. As for those 2 twins, leave them to me." "Providio say man," and then uptake with replied Ziston. Another man's voice, likely a trusted subordinate, let out a dry laugh. "What about that whole marrying both sisters thing? Aren't you worried about trouble?" "What trouble?" Ethan replied. "Those 2 girls are the perfect cover. They're blindly in love with me. As long as I divide my affection equally, they'll do anything I say." The room fell silent. Stella shot up, her face pale, and stumbled backward, her entire body shaking. Did you hear that? He used us from the very beginning." Clara was silent, biting her lip so hard it nearly drew blood. They played the video next. The screen showed the inside of a private meeting room at the resort. Ethan was sitting across from the chic woman with curly hair, the same one from the cafe. She smiled slyly as she poured him a glass of wine. "Is everything still going smoothly?" "Yes," Ethan answered. "Those two girls still think I'm genuinely in love with them. As soon as the paperwork is finalized and the last investment is released, I'm getting out of this hick town. I can break up with them however I want then. And don't worry about the villagers. Once the land is completely cleared, they can cry to the heavens and no one will listen. This village, Seabrook, is just a stepping stone." The sharp clink of their glasses echoed through the speakers. Their cruel smiles seemed to pierce through the screen, stabbing directly into Clara and Stella's hearts. Stella broke down into racking sobs. "I was so stupid. Clara. I trusted him so blindly." Clara hugged her sister tightly, tears now streaming down her own face, but her voice was laced with a new deferent, furious fire. "We can't be silent anymore. This time, we finish this." The next morning, as the first rays of sun touched the mossy roofs of Seabrook, Clara and Stella were already standing in the small square in front of the village market, the busiest place each morning. In Clara's hands was the laptop, connected to an external speaker. Beside it lay the USB drive, their final weapon. The villagers began to gather, calling out to one another, whispering in surprise to see the two girls who were once the center of gossip, now standing tall, their eyes ablaze. An old man spoke up. "What's going on? Why are you two standing in the middle of the market?" Clara took a step forward, her voice ringing out clearly. "We're sorry to disturb everyone, but today, we want you all to see the truth about Ethan Croft, the man our entire village put its faith in." She pressed play. The audio recording began, and Ethan's cold voice echoed across the square. "As for those two twins, leave them to me. They are the perfect cover." The crowd fell silent as the conversation continued. Every venomous word, every calculated scheme of greed and exploitation was laid bare, cutting into the listeners like a knife. A woman clenched her fists and screamed, "My God! He used those girls like tools." A murmur rose through the crowd like a wave. Disbelief. Anger. No one could doubt it any longer. Stella stood beside her sister, her voice choked with emotion but full of conviction. "We trusted him. We loved him. We even sacrificed our own dignity to protect that bizarre marriage. But all we got in return was to be a pawn in his dirty game." And then, as if on cue, Ethan appeared at the end of the lane. His eyes flashed with anger when he saw the crowd. But when he spotted the laptop, his expression turned to ice. "Clara. Stella. What is this nonsense?" Clara turned to face him, not a trace of fear in her eyes. "We're doing what we should have done a long time ago. We're exposing you for who you really are. A fraud who treats love like a commodity to be traded." Ethan moved to shut the laptop, but Stella blocked his path. "It's not that easy. Are you so afraid of the truth you have to run from it?" Her voice was firm, no longer the naive, smiling girl who had stood by his side. The villagers began to move in, surrounding Ethan. The eyes that had once held admiration were now filled with contempt. A middle-aged fisherman pointed a finger in his face. "You think we're stupid? You came here, seduced these two girls, and tried to steal our land for your resort. You scum." Ethan backed away, sweat beading on his forehead. Clara stepped forward, her voice clear. "You said that when the project was complete, you wouldn't have to pretend anymore. Well, today, you don't have to pretend anymore either." She clicked play on the final video. The image of Ethan and his partner toasting to their plan to obliterate Seabrook appeared for all to see. A furious shout erupted from the crowd. "Get out of our village." Ethan was shoved backward, tripping and falling in the middle of the market. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild with panic. An old woman threw her entire basket of fish at him. "An animal like you doesn't deserve to set foot on this land." He was chased out of the village, covered in mud and filth, amidst a sea of scornful eyes. When Ethan's figure had finally disappeared over the hill leading to the sea, Clara took her sister's hand. "We did it, Stella." Stella nodded, her lips trembling. For the first time, she felt truly free. They stood there, surrounded by the people who had once shunned them, who now looked at them with profound understanding. A week after the scandal, Ethan Croft's name vanished completely. The resort project was suspended indefinitely. That evening, the two sisters sat together on their porch. The sea was still blue. The waves still lapped the shore as they had for 1,000 years. "I used to think love was everything," Clara said pensively. "But maybe I was wrong. Some things are more important than love." Stella leaned her head on her sister's shoulder and whispered, "Like ourselves." "Right." The next morning, Stella presented 2 bus tickets. "I booked them. The city still holds a lot of opportunities. If we have to start over, we should at least do it in a place where no one knows who we are." On the bus leaving Seabrook for the second time, they sat beside each other, hands clasped tightly, their eyes fixed on the road ahead, where a new chapter of their lives was waiting to begin. 3 months later, a small, charming cafe opened on the outskirts of the city. It was named the Sisters' Corner, a simple name filled with history. Clara commanded the coffee bar while Stella managed their new online store. It was still a struggle, but for the first time in their lives, they were supporting themselves with their own hard work, dependent on no one. In the evenings, they would sit on the cafe's patio, watching the rush of city life pass by. Stella suddenly asked, "If another man comes along one day, would you dare to love again?" Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "Yes. But this time, I would never trade myself just to keep anyone." Stella squeezed her hand and smiled back. They had learned to love themselves, a bitter but priceless lesson. The two girls who had been buried under a village's scorn, who had loved the wrong person and trusted the wrong promises, had finally stepped out of the darkness on their own. They were no longer victims. They were survivors. They were living proof of a simple truth: no pain lasts forever. Only the people who choose to stay in the past do. And sometimes, letting go isn't defeat. It's the chance to start over, stronger than before. Thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Your support means the world to us.